Good evening to all our hosts, guests, and audiences in Hong Kong, and good afternoon to my colleagues in Prague here. My name is Martina Pecková, Černá, and I am guiding you through the Show Must Go Online thematic talk series. Before we start, as usually, I would like to thank the International Association of Theatre Critics Hong Kong for initiating this dialogue between Czech and Hong Kong performing arts, documentation, and research organizations. I would like to thank especially to Bernice Chan, who will be with us also today or tonight, but a little bit later on. This talk series is not the first collaboration between the Arts and Theatre Institute in Prague and the International Association of Theatre Critics Hong Kong, and we hope strongly into following our dialogue also further on. In our talks, we are reflecting the latest developments in performing arts in relation to the global challenges facing human civilization, and with it also the cultural sector. We are sharing examples of good practices and ideas that accompany the current changes in the live arts. And I very much hope that we are also inspiring each other, for example, to collaborate further. In preparing the structure of the Show Must Go Online talk series, we have drawn on the activities that the Arts and Theatre Institute in Prague has carried out in direct response to the anti-pandemic restrictions of the last 2 years, but also to other challenges that are also valid for the cultural sector, such as the climate crisis and the transformation of today's societies, and along with it, of the theater audience. These activities were mainly the Show Must Go On offline online discussion series and the show of podcast that started in autumn 2020, which we also presented in our last volume of this talk last week. The international training program Digital Leap for dancers and contemporary circus artists realized with 6 other European partners, which we presented last Monday. And the very basics of performing arts online cycle organized in spring 2020 when the SARS-CoV-19 pandemic broke out, and which will be discussed in today's meeting. All these series have been produced by the Perform Czech team at the Arts and Theatre Institute, which is a state organization established by the Ministry of Culture, Czech Republic, and in collaboration with our international partners and support of the Ministry of Culture, Czech Republic. Our team of the International Cooperation Department works under the brand Perform Czech. We provide a range of activities related to international cooperation of the current performing arts scene, theater, dance, contemporary circus, and multidisciplinary projects. As you see on your screens, Perform Czech is also an information portal in English for performing arts professionals that provides information about the current Czech performing arts scene and mediates information, contacts, and propositions for international collaboration. And last but not least, we also administer the National Czech Centers of International Theatre Organizations, not only of the International Association of Theatre Critics, but also of the International Theatre Institute, UNIMA, ASSITESH, and OISTAT. We warmly welcome the opportunity to present speakers such as artists, culture managers, or academics we have worked with in the mentioned project and cycles, and to reflect on current trends in the performing arts from a contemporary perspective. And I sincerely hope that in cooperation with our Hong Kong colleagues, we will spark a debate that will allow us not to only to name these trends, but also to get to know each other's theater cultures. Today, we will focus on the topics addressed by the very basics of performing arts online. We organized this series in spring 2020, during the first wave of the COVID pandemic, when the entire field of live arts was going through the first shock and also reaction to social distancing measures and lockdowns of theaters and culture organizations. In their wake, many artists and organizations moved towards making their work accessible through digital media. But many theaters and artists lacked not only financial resources, but also knowledge, skills, and know how to do that. In our education and discussion series, we therefore focused on these areas: methodology of complete recording of theater performance, copyright issues related with the use of recording of theater performances, editing, camera and dramaturgy, subtitling, and last but not least, documenting and archiving theater or dance productions. We looked at the financial and technical aspects of making a professional or at least semi-professional recordings of a theater performance, the use of recordings of productions from a copyright perspective, the differences between teaser and trailer, between technical recording and recording of theater or dance performance for general audience. We focused on dramaturgical preparation of recordings, which is also closely related to the technical aspects of translating theater into film language. We have capitalized our knowledge gained from these webinars in the administration of a special program, which was opened by the Ministry of Culture in 2029, and which was aimed at making arts accessible through digital media. It was an extraordinary program of financial support provided during the pandemic, only last year. We don't know if there will be some continuation of this program. But anyway, as we mentioned also this program in our last talk, I wanted to highlight that we had this special program last year. Both our today's guests, Marta Ljubková and Ondřej Šejnoha, were involved in the series I've just mentioned. And for today's talk, we asked them to look at the topics I mentioned from the perspective of the post-COVID era. We hope that we are in post-COVID era. Hopefully it's not just an interim moment of the COVID pandemics. And to see what was beneficiary during this special period and what remained with us. We have discussed also in the last talks that the digital agenda stays with us. So we would like to see in what form and how the theaters and also artistic academies are dealing with this agenda. We will start with Marta. Marta graduated from the Faculty of Philosophy and Arts at Charles University in Prague and from the Academy of Performing Arts, where she currently lectures. Her main teaching interests are dramaturgy, history of scenography, literature. She has worked as a publishing editor, freelance dramaturg, reviewer, and editor. And what is probably the most important for our talk today, she has served as the head dramaturg of the National Theatre Drama Company since 2015. And she's also a program director of the International Theatre Festival Prague Crossroads, organized by the National Theatre. Hello, Marta. Welcome in this talk. And I will start with a very simple question to provide your professional context and work of both as a theater artist and as a theater pedagogue. So where are we now? What's your context? What are your thoughts right now?
Mm-hmm. So I'm associated with the National Theatre, with the drama department, as you said previously, and therefore everything what we did during the pandemic was influenced by that fact. The main fact is that the National Theatre is directly financed by the Ministry of Culture. Actually, it's the only theatre institution financed by the Ministry of Culture. So the institution is relatively economically and socially and also politically coherent and stable institution. So one main feature which must be mentioned before we start to talk about anything else is that we did not face any kind of existential problems during the pandemic. All the people working for the National Theatre are there on permanent contract, and the theatre had budget for its everyday activities, including shows, etc., etc. So that was a relatively convenient situation we found ourselves at the beginning of the pandemic. And we could go two ways. The one way would be do nothing, and we would kind of like survive, or take the money which we had for our normal artistic activities and try to convert them into something else. And the National Theatre, and this is very important thing to mention, has, or the drama department has 3 buildings coming from various periods, from 18th century up to the end of the 20th century, quite big sizes, or in Czech contexts, big sizes from 400 to 100 seats, which is relatively big for the Czech context, but I think it's not that much for the Hong Kong context, for instance. So we are tightly connected with the activities done originally and on purpose for those buildings. So all of a sudden, we lost the place where we contact the audience, which I, from the dramaturgical point of view, I found, or I actually keep finding that as a huge impulse for dramaturgy. You start to rethink of the aim and the purpose and the mission, actually, of the National Theatre on completely different ways. It means, and this is one of the main advantage, if I may put it this way, of the COVID situation, was that we could reach out to much wider audience. We started to communicate not only with the people who actually travel to the National Theatre, but via online or via different channels, which I might speak about later. We managed to reach the audience not only in the Czech Republic, but also abroad, because we try to do many of our activities in English or with English subtitles. So it helped us to think more globally, or to think more widely about the audience. It's not the regular audience who comes to our buildings, but actually a viewer or spectator or our collaborator on audience side could be basically everybody. So this accessibility, I think, open up completely new question of who can the theater be for, because still you feel, definitely in this country, you feel a kind of barrier of people coming to the theater. Not everybody goes, and there are loads of barriers on the way of going to the theater. So this is something we have to think about further on, and I think it helped us to imagine, as I said, wider audience. So this is what was the advantage. The disadvantage, of course, was the lost contact, everyday contact with the audience, and trying to explore new ways how to speak to the audience and with the audience. At the beginning, we decided not to put our performances online because we did not have good recordings and we did not have the expertise to make a good recordings immediately. It took us 2 years to learn or to experiment with how to capture the theater performance. So we decided not to go below our qualities and our standards, or what we think our standard is. And we decided not to broadcast our shows because the shows, the recordings which we have are not in the qualities that would be equivalent to our stage performance. So we started to think in other formats, and we decided to develop various formats. The easiest and the fastest one was the stage talk show. Maybe I could ask Barbara to present some pictures so you can get a better idea. Throughout the first lockdown, we decided to broadcast culture discussions with various experts, theater practitioners, even politicians. We managed to get the Minister of Culture. This is one of our venues, which you can see, it's the oldest one. And we happen to have recordings, and now they are still available on YouTube with, yeah, you see the setting inside the empty building. So the name of the series was Culture is the Nation, and we try to reflect immediate theoretical and practical issues dealing with the mainly theater, but also culture situation as such. That was the first thing which we did. The other one was an attempt to transform the planned show into something else. And you will see the pictures soon after that. This was a Zoom performance. Actually, the performance ended up being a film, but it was formatted as a Zoom conference. So it was one actor after another, individual actors, and actually this film, because it was not a show, originally the idea was the show, the end was a documentary film, which was broadcasted on various film festival, documentary film festival, and it's still available. Yeah, you can see the pictures from the filming. As you can see, it was done in very strict conditions. Everyone not here while doing makeup and during the filming, but it was the director, the cameraman, me, and the actor in one room, filmed one after another, and it created the film. We also changed another show into 360 degrees film. So that was another filming. So we never tried to work with the show itself, but create new formats of the video. So this is the video part of our productions. And then we try to experiment with completely new media. So we had a show, audio show, which was recorded in a studio. You need just your cell phone. You download the show into your cell phone. Now you can see pictures from that recording. And the actor is actually invited to your flat. It's called You in My House. And it's a kind of a dialogue of an actor who is this time not present there, but it changes your way how you perceive your apartment, and it's for two spectators. So that was an intention. And then we did various podcasts, etc. But I think this was the most important thing. We knew we didn't have the filming expertise, and we did the filming of the shows later. We tried to find new ways how to transfer our original show plans from the shows. And we try to develop new formats. Besides this audio format, we also had a phone walk, one actor being on the phone, the other spectator. So it's technically one-to-one performance done as a walk through Prague. So we try to find new ways how to stay in contact, sometimes online, sometimes via other devices. But in fact, when you sum it up, we produce quite a lot of projects, I think. And the most important thing for me, and I'm sorry for being so long, is that we should keep staying in this dramaturgical section, I would say, or dramaturgical experiments with the formats for the future as well. And maybe we can stop the photos because you already saw it. The main result for me is that having a theater is an excellent advantage, but at the same time we are losing audience. Less and less people is coming to the theater, and the situation will be even more difficult with the economical situation. But at the same time, there are ways how we can reach out to the audience, not only physically in the same building. So I think it had a certain kind of positive effect to our minds of how to perceive, maybe not theater as such, but performative arts, and how to open up the doors to people who never thought about coming to the theater. Of course, we had more activities, and I could speak about it more deeper if there is some time, and I can answer you any question in later discussion. As far as school is concerned, and that would be one sentence, anything I could say about the development, anything positive I could say about the development of the theater, I couldn't apply to the theater, to the school. I mean, the loss of the direct contact, especially in the art school, cannot be replaced by any kind of other activities. The fact is that the tendency of our students, especially last 2 years, we tried so many formats, radio formats, various formats, and somehow the student tend towards the direction which is non-stage direction. So we are losing at least some part of the generation which feels strong affect for the real staging, you know what I mean, doing a performance on the stage. Our students nowadays tend more to audio walks, audio formats, video formats, rather than doing a proper show, because to do that, you have to gain certain abilities, expertise, and also self-confidence.
Thank you, Marta. Maybe we can complete this bridge to the academic sphere yet in presenting a little bit the department where you lecture, because you are mainly active at the Department of Alternative and Puppet Theater. I guess you are not that much involved in the Department of Dramatic Theater, which is, let's say...
This is the only department I'm involved in, the Alternative and Puppet Theater.
When you mentioned that what your students tend to do, the formats they are choosing, isn't it also connected somehow with the main focus of your department, or do you really feel that this is the result of the last 2 years development in live arts?
Partially. Both explanations are true, and the fact is that we don't tend to doing big shows, and the students are always supported in their activities towards visual arts, etc., etc. But now I really feel the lack of interest in real proper stage performances, which I am trying to wait, and I don't want to jump into conclusion, and we will see that after some time, because we have to remember one thing: this generation missed 2 years of audience experience, which is crucial. Those are formative years when you're 17, 18, 19, 21, 22, you see so many shows which influence somehow your audience taste as well as your future professional tendencies. Let's say this way. So if you don't have any theater at all, because there's none, then you of course develop your own skills or develop your own expertise based on something else. So that might change, and some of my colleagues are far more optimistic than I am, but I can spot this. But of course, because we made the students to do something, we encourage them in doing other projects, the project which could have been done, for instance, online or on distant way of collaboration. We influenced them and supported them. They started to feel more secure. And sometimes when we have school, sometimes the students tend to do it or solve the problem via audio walk. So you have to push them back on the stage sometimes, because, go on stage, be there physically, face the situation of director-actor situation, face that. It requires a lot of experience. And as I said, communication skills, which were suffering as well, and self-confidence too.
Okay, thank you. Let's move now from the theater faculty to another faculty of the Academy of Performing Arts in Prague. Ondřej Šejnoha is director of the FAMU studio. FAMU is the abbreviation for the Film and TV School of the Academy of Performing Arts. Under Ondřej leaderships, the studio significant number of projects have been nominated and awarded by prestigious events. And I guess that also during the COVID pandemic, it has become quite important place and factor and center at the faculty. Ondřej, would you please present shortly the faculty and the FAMU studio?
So first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be with you in Hong Kong as well, even directly, remotely. So very briefly, the Film and TV School, it's a part of Academy of Performing Arts, and our sister faculties are the Theater faculty and Music faculty. So in a film school, as you can mention probably, it's about to capture everything what's happening as well in our sister faculties or around the world, let's say. And Studio FAMU itself is like the full production and post-production house, actually as well a little bit maybe broadcasting because of COVID, you know, so I will tell you later. So we are taking care of any kind of capturing what is happening in our sister faculties or in any other activities we are taking care of in terms of many projects we are doing within every year. It means roughly we are producing like 450 projects per year from, let's say, very little one, like the training, filming, to the very final and the huge projects, including big budgets. And the very important part of this is to capture and understand how performing arts on the stage is behaving, what our future professionals should be ready for. During the pandemic, it started in March 2020, let's say, for our school, we are under Ministry of Education, and we had to follow very strictly the requirements given by the Ministry of Education for whole education area. So it took quite a long time for us, like for the universities itself, to, let's say, make some space, and especially for this art academies, you know, where you really need to be somehow in touch with the real environment to find the way and path how to be quite safe and quite okay with the requirements, and still to try provide our students, professors, and as well our professional teams within the faculty with the possibility to somehow continue to work. Because one thing is to go with the theory immediately online, which is quite difficult in the beginning, but very quickly, you know, we are okay with that. And Studio FAMU played quite a significant role because we are taking care of the whole central data storage over here. So we very quickly change as well our internal policies from just the taking care of the data captured because of filming to the data broadcasting, let's say, within the online sessions with the students. And the other part was, and it really took quite time for us to find a way how to still provide our students and professors by the possibilities to try at least to don't forget how to capture the things and be ready for better times, let's say. And as you know, as everywhere around the world, between these 2 hard years of the COVID time, there were few weeks, sometimes months, with the lighter restrictions, let's say, when we immediately started to think how to restart our productions over here inside the Studio FAMU with the whole faculty, you know. But on the other hand, in terms of performing arts, let's say, because of our theater school academy and music academy, where we are capturing and taking care of the concerts or the theater pieces. So we have to wait once our sister faculties will be ready for, which really took some time. And sometimes we started planning the production be ready with our equipment and everything. And unfortunately, quite like a short time before it should happen physically somewhere, we had to call off everything and wait again for another better terms, let's say, okay. But finally, we found some way how to do it, be very careful with as less people as possible around the crew, you know, which as well is a little bit different because sometimes you need really more people to help you with everything, but we get it. And we did few pieces between this period, at least to try how it works in this specific time for us. So in comparison with the theater itself, we didn't need to broadcast something out of our facilities, let's say, but we had to be able to keep continuity, how to work, and let's say keep some records for the future use, because as well many platforms, I mean online platforms and streaming platforms started think how to use as well the projects from the academy production, let's say, which is quite interesting to learn about it. Like the big streamers were interested as well for the pieces we are doing with the theater and music faculty, you know. So it was interesting for us in terms of another thinking about licensing, about another way how to build the contracts with every actor and so on. So it was interesting, and it was like the new challenge. I don't think it will come back if COVID won't come back, I hope, and we will go back to the, let's say, safe space where we mainly participating with the performing arts school to capture their pieces. We are finishing it over here as a projects, any other project, you know, we are doing over here, and presenting it within the faculties, or if it's a good piece, for example, in cooperation with Czech television, because some performances are done already in advance and in co-production with Czech television, and it's included in some kind of programming in their schedule. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 pieces per year, which is interesting because it requires much more attention, let's say, you know, than to just train. So in our case, it was like this, and these past 2 years or more than 2 years, it was the fight really about the conditions we can keep, even not a very good condition outside of the world, you know, to be here, to open our facilities and still continue to work somehow in our stages over here, at least at Studio FAMU, and give some opportunity to our students and professors and the crews around to continue work, even individually sometimes. Even sometimes just the director of photography was over here in our stage, you know, and trying to capture something and understand that he's still continuing with some kind of knowledge. So it's briefly from my side about the COVID time. And post-COVID sure is the impact, because first of all, we didn't finally, even I wanted personally to cut some kind of production, the portion of production from the COVID time. So faculty itself, they decided to keep it in high numbers as it was before. And now we are still feeling it is a huge impact of, let's say, production of everything at the same time. So it's pretty busy time at the moment. And I'm quite curious how it will be in the autumn, in September, when our very final screenings of all projects are happening usually, how it will be on the screen, let's say, how it will be the result in terms of quality, and as well how many students will decide maybe to really quit some production because of another one. We will see. But now we are keeping this high amount of projects in our hands and trying to help them. And what is, I think, quite important to mention as well, FAMU itself is pretty international. So sure, with the COVID, when COVID came, so we immediately had to close our doors as well for the international participants over here. And it's quite a few hundred students per year in total, you know, from many programs abroad. And so we finally starting again in this term now with during the summer, you know, upcoming summer. So it's as well another, let's say, test for us if we still remember the good track, how to take care of them and help them to realize over here interesting pieces when which then later are taken back to their countries, mainly to US. So it's briefly from my side.
Thank you very much for presenting Studio FAMU. Maybe we might add that lockdown of theaters, but also lockdown of schools and educational organizations in our country during the pandemic was one of the longest compared to other European countries or to other countries in the world. So it was really very long, strict lockdown when really there were very strict measures about social contacts and theaters were closed. And this gap of being able to produce and to meet audiences live is still visible now in the other way, which was mentioned here with the overproduction and the overlapping of many events and performances. Marta, you presented the first, let's say, phase of the National Theatre's drama company reaction towards COVID and lockdown. I guess that all the projects you have mentioned so far weren't planned in your original dramaturgical plans. They were really immediate reaction on the unprecedented situation. But you mentioned that later on, you went through this first, let's say, shock phase or the first reaction on the situation. You came back to your original dramaturgical plans and you tried to realize them in other formats and or in the forms which were possible at the time. Could you mention the other projects or productions or works you produced in the theater, and maybe also tell us what you feel that will remain also in the agenda of the theater from this digital shift you went through during the pandemic, also under normal, let's say, conditions which we are having right now in Europe.
Mm-hmm. I name various productions which we did or project which we did. I did not mention one film because eventually, instead of a proper rehearsals, we actually shot real film, which is now broadcasted in movie theaters, and it could be found online on some of those. It's not the streaming platform, but it's a library of various Czech films. So this is definitely, we stepped out of the purely theater box, even though it was done by a theater director and the original intention was a performance, but it's situated into the theater, but the theater was completely changed into a film set. So this is something, and I don't think we would ever get so far. And I don't think the theater will ever get so far, because the one thing which I did not mention and should be mentioned here, that all those alternative projects or non-theatrical projects or non-stage projects are not cheaper than theater. And if we come to the question of film, in the Czech context, you can add one zero to the budget, and then you get to realistic or semi-realistic prices. And I think the theaters were shocked by the fact at the beginning, and therefore the activities were so reduced, because you can't just make a film out of your show unless you get you extend you double, triple, or I don't know, I cannot count more in English, into completely different numbers. So that was a shock. We managed during the season, we managed to record some of our shows in normal regime, meaning not I'm just filming the performance with one camera at the back and two cameras at the side. So this is how the shows are usually being captured, but we managed to capture it with the audience and then have some extra details being filmed. So like a proper or better capturing a show, it took like at least 4 days, and not mentioning the post-production, which is extremely complicated and extremely expensive as well. But quite honestly, we are doing this capturing not as a replacement of our normal program, but some more like a archive activity. So we don't really intend to not sell it at all, or to broadcast it regularly, but to have it somewhere in the archives, let's say for the future generation, because most of the shows don't leave any traces, except for few bad reviews and then some pictures and trailer or teaser. So we decided to preserve some of the shows which we did before, which we staged. So this is more like a message for the future, and I can imagine that the techniques and everything will change so much that it will look silly in a few years' time. But at least, as I said, it's a message of the history. And I think this COVID experiments with filming will dramatically change the requirements of theater artists on how to capture the show, because before that it was mainly the Czech television which was filming the shows and broadcasting it on their like channel number 4, or I don't have television, so I don't know how many channels there are. So one of the arts channel of the Czech television, but at the same time, and I spoke with the people from television, this is not very often watched. And it's not so popular among people. It's usually people who saw the show, they want to recall the memories. So I think we have to make, together with the film artist, to make one step forward towards capturing of the theater piece. So, and this is something I did not mention and should be mentioned here as an important knowledge which we all learn, is tightest collaboration between arts, because we really started to work much more with film artists. All those filmings which we did later but done with the film directors, we at least consulted, but you have to learn how to work with the technique. It's the same when you work with audio. You have to meet the people who are specialized on sound. So basically, this critical situation united all of us in sharing experiences and sharing knowledges and expertise. And as well as a side effect, which might be important as well, is that the community of artists united as such in advocacy. This is one of the very important messages of the National Theatre as the strongest and most stable national state culture institution, or at least theatre. It's to be the glue of the community, or since we have the closest relationship towards the Ministry of Culture, we should be one of the advocates. And this is what our discussions were meant for, to put the community together and actually formulate the main problems of the community. And I think it helped. Unfortunately, the situation is the situation, I don't know how much it affects policy in Hong Kong, but the war in Ukraine is extremely strong here, and we are all influenced by the war situation in the country, which is so close to us, and all the Czechs are, or at least most of the Czechs, including the government, are strongly helping, and of course it has economical effect. So unfortunately, the culture gets to its priorities and needs as, unfortunately, the last sector. So we are going to face the economical crisis, or suffers the harsh economical times or situation. And if we work and unite ourselves as like one sector, it helps. And I think we made remarkable steps towards the unity of the sector. I know this is not artistic, but I think it's important to mention that. And one thing, again, which helped us very much was the tight connection with international collaborators. This way, having like only the distant possibilities somehow put the or erase the borders. Somehow I was able to bring to a discussion with our students some of the most famous world directors. I would never have enough money to bring them physically to Prague because they're very busy, they're very expensive, their time is expensive. But this way, it took them 1.5 hours on Zoom. And this way we could meet many people we wouldn't be able to meet physical in normal time. So it reduced the distances, and we found a way how to meet with the people which are impossible to reach. Unreachable people could be reached all of a sudden. And I think it helped to think internationally as well, which is something what the Czech, definitely theater, I don't know about film, but the theater community needs to think more internationally. And this really helped.
Mm. I would add, because you mentioned the accessibility of theater already in your first answer. So of course, international cooperation has been stressed a lot during pandemic, how to keep it, because also the direct exchange was blocked, and the artistic community found new ways how to interact, how to relate, how to exchange. But let's dedicate some thought also to the audience, because you mentioned that during pandemic you reached some new groups of audiences which would probably not visit personally your theater before. So how do you feel, did something changed about the audience now in the post-COVID era, or did they come to normal behavior? And we have also one question already from our audience asking specifically about communication with the elder audiences in these times. So what is the difference also? Because I can imagine that it's quite or it's easier to communicate through online ambiences with the younger generation, but with older people, it might be tricky. So what do you think?
That is definitely true. And as far as the communication with audience or reaching the wider range of audience is concerned, I am more idealistic than realistic. And I think we are at the beginning of the journey. Because first of all, National Theatre is accepted as a conservative institution. So the audience coming, not only coming to the National Theatre, but following the activities of the National Theatre tends to be more conservative. So trying to reach out of this box or of this like fences, we are not as efficient and successful as I would like us to be, and as I hope will be one day. And Czech audience, like this general audience, the general audience, which keeps going to the theaters, because nowadays we are facing the lack of the audience, but not in this standard, I would say, commercial or bourgeois kind of theaters. These theaters, they still have enough audience. And actually the historical building of the National Theatre was packed throughout the whole June. We couldn't complain about the audience because the audiences came, exactly those elderly audience, for instance, who were missing their theaters, the formats they are used to go. But we lost a lot of young audience. definitely. And when I say we, I mean us as a sector, because what applies to the students applies to various generation and layers of social structures. People simply stopped going to the theater and never came back. So as far as the reaching new people is concerned and reaching them via new formats, we have to keep going and we should not give up, because the results, of course, are not as optimistic or idealistic as we wanted them to be. And actually myself, I had much stronger idea or much stronger expectation about how far and how intensely we are able to reach. And we did not reach that far. That is completely true. As far as working with the seniors, for instance, or elderly audience is concerned, I think we have to go vice versa. Especially in our future project, I think this is the high time when to bring the elderly audience, not just to see the show, because yeah, that's what we are doing, but to introduce another format which would reach beyond the stage or performance kind of experience, but to offer more, have more discussion, have more workshops, have more activities meant for a certain segment of the audience. This is something what I learned during the COVID as well, that in the National Theatre you try to, you know, embrace everybody, and at the end you realize that you embrace nobody. So we should be more direct to certain kind of audience, having on our mind that this project is meant specifically for, let's say, teenagers. This project is meant specifically for elderly, and let's do a project where the groups mingle. But we have to keep this on mind. There is not one general member of the audience, and this is a big task for dramaturgy of the future. We cannot think of a spectator. There's nothing like that. We have to categorize more what we want to offer to who, because the spectrum of where people can go and what they can see and experience is so wide that we really have to have specific member of the audience on mind. And when I say that, it sounds very theoretical and like huge, but I think this is a trend where we, you know, it's not us standing in the middle, knowing everything and waiting for the people to come. No, we have to open up and invite the people more directly.
I think your last words illustrated very well also the whole process your team was doing in the National Theatre, which opened up very much also the question, what kind of institution is National Theatre? What is its role in the society? What is the mission, the core mission of an institution like a National Theatre? Ondřej, Marta mentioned that even for such a rich and probably the richest theater in our country, it was really demanding, I mean, financially demanding, to transform their work into something digital, into or working with filming and all these, you know, processes coming from the cinema. I have a question if maybe the COVID situation had some impact on Studio FAMU in terms of better equipment, better personal conditions, because I can imagine that also the requirements and the intensity of cooperation between the three faculties of the Academy for Performing Arts intensified or are more demanding, not only during the COVID pandemic, but especially now when everyone tries to produce and cover the gap or the break caused by the lockdowns during pandemic.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I will start with the, in general, you know, some think about the past, short past with COVID, and the time now and near future. Actually, in terms of like the conditions itself, sure, we started to be more careful to keep the hygiene on the highest level for all people who are coming into our facilities and premises in general. So it was very demanding because it was, let's say, in general in cinema industry, it was quite strict anyway, but now it came much more strict than before, all these conditions and measures, and we did many manuals, for our crews, when they started, how to keep going the shooting and all these measures on the set, every day, many times, including temperature and whatever else. So it was very demanding. It was very costly, I have to say, because we really spent quite huge amount of money in comparison to our standard production year, just to keep our crews and staff around safe, So this was very interesting. And in terms of technology in general, sure, we immediately started to focus more than before, even we did before, to this, let's say, data management agenda, which was definitely different immediately once we started with online lessons for the whole faculty, and with the work with, let's say, bigger amount of our data than before we did, because we needed something from our past when we haven't been able to provide like the current production. So we had to come back to our past productions. So we have been thinking a lot, and sure did many changes in our data management policy, which for the first time, on the first place, it was that we had to be very strict in, let's say, in terms when we had to receive something, to be ready to prepare it for another work with the data, let's say, or with the result, including online session with the students to show what they did, or with the live streaming, between the continents sometimes, because we, as well as my colleague Marta mentioned as well, so the film faculty, sure, they use the online lessons to connect with the interesting people abroad, to really, let's say, bring at the time of waiting for physical contact, people closer to our students or our community over here, and to talk about many aspects of the production, even waiting for the physical one. So this was definitely challenging. We, let's say, heavily invested in some kind of online environment as well to be ready for this kind of hybrid life. And I have to say, it finally somehow is staying with us. So before the COVID, we have been strictly physical in terms of meetings because of pre-production, any kind of, let's say, location scouting as well, including theaters, or, to see the set and understand how it should look. At the moment, if possible, people are as well asking if we can do it in hybrid way. It means many people is still willing to connect online, because we can do it. We have the tools at the moment to show them what's going on. We can talk about the things and be ready for some physical contact later. So, which is interesting, I have to say. I don't know yet, because we will see in the autumn, as I told before, because these final screenings with the COVID era postponed projects will come probably. So we will see everything together, and we can think more about. So it will be interesting to see if it has any kind of impact in production area, to be more flexible with this hybrid stuff and so on. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes I still think it needs more physical touch with another people and environment to maybe understand more. That's my personal opinion. But on the other hand, it's a tool, and it must be included in our workflow, which is now, I think, for permanent over there. So this is interesting part. In terms of technology itself, sure, if I can ask Barbara to show a few pictures behind me. We are mainly filming the stuff in the theater stages, and mainly in a disc theater, which is the official theater theater academy. So we are filming on the 4 cameras mainly, with live edit, and it's included in a curriculum of the whole faculty. It means from directors to the cinematographers, sound designers, editors, and production students, definitely. So they are like working on this together, and training, let's say, how it should look in the real world, with the professionals from Czech television sometimes, with us to think how it should be done, and for TV formats. But in terms of technology, there is another impact of the COVID, and it's that everything is postponed in deliveries physically, So even we have been preparing some investment to the camera part, to the data management more than before. So now we are facing the time when we have to wait for the physical deliveries, even the money we have, let's say, and we can do it, we can buy it, but it's physical impossibility to bring it on time is another challenge. So we know what we need, but on the other hand, we have to wait once we will receive it. And as you know, the technology is like becoming older very quickly. So even we, maybe in 2020, 2021, with some experiences from this COVID time, we understood more how to make the set as best as possible in terms of technology workflow. So now we are 1 year after, and it's a little challenge. What we should receive finally? Even we have been thinking about the latest, let's say, models of the cameras and everything before, but we can't receive anything. So it's another challenge. It's not so bad now. It's becoming a little bit better, but sure, the prices are increasing horribly, I have to say sometimes. And sure, the school doesn't have any kind of like the unlimited resources, so we have to be very strict with this kind of stuff. And so now in the afternoon, in the autumn, we should finish some kind of workflow investment over here because of this theater pieces as well in terms of our capturing. So I'm very looking forward to what we will be able physically receive and open more possibilities for our faculty and the sister faculties as well. So this is what happened. But on the other hand, I have to say that people are, from my point of view, because of all these restrictions, they are in some way more organized in terms of production, because before it was just came and work. Now they had to be more ready for the production itself than before. It's my feeling from it, which is the good way or good thing from this COVID era, to be more ready with more steps before you really do something. It means that you have to think more about the stuff you are doing.
Thank you for your insight. Marta, would you like to add something from your teacher's experience about the change needs or situation in theater or artistic education caused by COVID and post-COVID? You mentioned already some trends that your students, due to their recent experience, they don't go so much on stage and they work in other formats, but are there also some other trends you would like to mention connected with the COVID and post-COVID era?
I think the students in general changed a lot, as it changed affected every generation. The students are different. Something I don't know if it's tightly connected with the COVID, but it might be, is that we are missing, or me as a lecturer, I miss the relationship to text. And I don't mean text as a play, but text as such. We are facing the first generation, which, not that it does not read because they are not interested in it, but the text material is not the way how they accept or absorb information. It's definitely more visual generation, and sometimes it's more complicated for them to read a text because they don't have the skills. And I never realized how much it is some kind of a long time development, that you really develop your readership. And I think that will affect all higher education, because we are generation based on books and based on absorption of information and everything, basically, by text, via letters. And this will totally reshape the form of education. And I don't know if it's definitely connected with the arts as well, because it affects the art as well, I think. So this is my late observation.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Also, as we are here with the critics, theater critics community, which and the critic is very much based on text. So that's another, element in the whole chain of changes and shifts in arts, and more specifically in live or performing arts. Well, I would like to remind our attendees that the Q&A session is open. So if you have some comments or questions, you can address them through the Q&A section in our Zoom application. But now I would like to invite into our discussion also our respondent, Jeffery Lin. Jeffery works across literature, criticism, translation, curation. He is member of University of Hong Kong Culture Leadership Youth Academy and the International Association of Theatre Critics Hong Kong. He was also co-founder and marketing director of Culture Lab Plus, which is a Hong Kong independent literature publishing house, and was awarded several awards in literature and arts criticism. So Jeffery, welcome on our panel. Do you have maybe some questions or remarks to the topics we have discussed with our guests so far, with Marta and Ondřej?
I think I will respond on a few aspects of what all of the attendees and speakers have talked about. Especially, I think maybe we could first start with the international aspect of the post-COVID era. Because actually I was now in Poland because I just attended the Puppetry School International Festival. And one of the things that I really feel about is the language barriers that we are facing. And I feel like oftentimes, I'm not sure in Europe, I'm also currently based in London, but every time I walk into the theater, subtitle is pretty rare. There is not much subtitle oftentimes. And I think maybe after the digital production of different kind of theater form, no matter it's more like a archival recording of the show or a transform to a online streaming, it helped us to break the language barriers and also connect to a wider international theater community. And I think this is especially important for example, Central or Eastern European country. Because of the language barrier we have, these countries are not in the Anglophone speaking world. And actually, this does affect the transfer and circulation of theater knowledge and history. And in terms of the maybe a more curatorial level of international festival. Because, for example, in Hong Kong, oftentimes I could notice that there is a tendency of festival in Hong Kong. They buy shows from English-speaking country, for example, the UK. I think some of the reasons is because of the accessibility of materials they have. For example, they may go to a conference or a theater expo in Australia, and maybe a lot of the companies that are attending there are from the Anglophone world, but not from maybe like Central or Eastern European world. But through this kind of maybe more open archival system of having the video with subtitles or even production in English, it helps better to circulate these work to other parts of the world. by seeing this kind of archival material, I think it helps the curator from other parts of the world to purchase or to invite an artistic community from this part of the world to, for example, Hong Kong or other place, Asia in general, in the easier way. And talking about the young audience, I think it's also a very key issue to think about, because as Marta said, we are kind of losing young audience, and even the theater students are now turning into maybe more film or radio or other kind of broadcast production. I think it's also interesting to think about how we could use digital production, digital format of the show in terms of, for example, marketing or promotion or reach out. I think this also lies on a very complicated socio-economic context of different countries, mainly those metropolitan big city, because after the pandemic, we could clearly see there's a trend. People are into podcasts now. I think one of the reasons is because the flat price globally actually getting more expensive, and people are living in suburb, or they need a lot of traveling time, and they start listening a lot to podcasts. And last week I was with the other international theater critics, and one of the Brazilian critics told me their theater group during the pandemic tried to produce a show in a kind of a broadcast format. Actually, it's a mixture of different kind of social media communication application, like it's using WhatsApp, Spotify, emails. It is actually a very personalized experience. I think maybe not meaning to produce another type of show in this kind of format. What I am thinking is maybe part of the show or as a teaser of the show could be could be produced in a podcast format, or this kind of WhatsApp or whatever format that is, which the theater itself could reach out to audience that does not interest in theater at all, because they have a very, actually it's the same in Hong Kong. They have a very, how would I say, stereotypical or very fixed impression of the theater. Oh, it's something about just a few people on the stage and then speaking, and it's so boring. I don't understand the art, and this is not my thing. And maybe through this kind of a social media platform, it helped more effectively reach to this group of audience that have never experienced the magic of theater. Because I think as long as they have the first experience being present in the theater, if that show is good, it could create opportunity for them to come back to the theater, even for new audience. Yeah, I think this is what I am thinking now. And maybe adding one more point, because responding to the audience asking about elderly's audience. I think for example, in London, in the UK, after the pandemic, also trigger or encourage the TV station to produce or to record more shows online. For example, in Sky TV, they have something called the Sky Art, something like a Netflix, but a performing arts version. It includes concerts and different stuff. I think the elderly audience, which actually have interested in theater even before the pandemic, they are now growing and more into this kind of TV format of the performance. One thing is because they could watch it at home in a more relaxed setting, because I think sometimes accessibility is an issue. They might have a physical immobility as a barrier, or they need a carer to bring them to the theater, which is not always possible. And I think this kind of collaboration between the film and television industry with the theater have make it more accessible to these kind of elderly audience. And TV, different from online platform like a Zoom performance or different kind of streaming platform, or even VR or special kind of effect, is much more easier and accessible in terms of the user experience of the interface of technology itself to this kind of elderly audience. So yeah, and I think it basically helped better to archive the show. And the collaboration between across industry to the TV industry maybe also is a solution how for a smaller theater or a not so resourceful theater could archive their work, because the production cost will be kind of outsourced or be on the shoulder of some other institution or commercial entity, so they could take care of the recording and the production costs while you would still have the footage.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for your comments and remarks. Marta or Ondřej, do you want to pick some of the topics addressed by Jeffrey and comment?
I might add something because I completely agree with everything. And as far as the elderly audience is concerned, I would like to add that this is the most faithful audience. Elderly audience is the audience which is habitual audience, and they come regularly and they can forgive you many things which like the irregular audience would not forgive you. And therefore I agree with the personalized approach. It's always nice when you, and I could feel this in German theaters, before you buy a ticket, before you go, they send you email, you know, after the show, they ask you how you like the show and stuff like that. This little marketing, which is like demonstrating that the theater knows about you and it cares about your opinion, it definitely helps. And from what you said, Jeffrey, I like that very much. We have to shake the stereotype of what the theater is. I think this is the mission for next years. Just, it's so funny that you say that the theater is something, you know, few people speaking and it's very boring. I don't understand where did this concept of theater comes from, but it passes from one generation to another generation. Not that I have not seen such shows, but I can avoid the shows and it's not that difficult. So I think nowadays we have to stop asking the question, oh, is that a theater? But open the concept of theater and adopt whatever could be perceived as performative arts under the umbrella of theater. Why not? Not to ask this silly question and rather say, you know, look at it, guys, this might be a theater as well. So rather than saying this is not a theater, opening the question like, look, what can a theater be? And it definitely means shake the stereotypes and keep shaking it on and on until we will get rid of this stereotype. And as far as marketing is concerned, I would say, and especially marketing connected with social media and stuff, I think this is one of the biggest issues in the country. And we are waiting for the new generation of marketers. Maybe you can send us some from Hong Kong because we don't have any. And public relation and all this industry is suffering here. And I think if we don't find ways how to address the audience, as soon as the theater people will stop being posh for getting connected with, for instance, I don't know, YouTubers or whoever, influencers, we have to break this stereotype of dividing arts and the marketing. We somehow have to collaborate, otherwise we will die. It's us who will suffer from this balance. And as far as the titles are concerned, I just wanted to say that all the things which we put online during, including the audio show, it's either titled into English, or it's done in English. We have this audio, you know, telephone speaking with you. It's done in English and it's done in Czech. We have 2 language versions because anything which we put online, we immediately thought of the international audience. So all the project which we did in last, I don't know, 2 years have English language accessibility. It's inevitable, I think.
Ondřej, would you like to react to some of the topics? Maybe I can add that if you want to comment on also change not of the marketing needs, but of the market itself, because I can imagine that COVID brought also big opportunities for new companies to pop up with services demanded in online services and filming services. So how do you perceive the situation?
Yeah, definitely. I would just comment shortly about this performing arts or live performing arts. You know, we haven't been thinking too much before that I'm talking from our perspective of the film and TV school over here. I mentioned it shortly in my first part of speech that we haven't been thinking it could be interesting for someone else, you know, like later, let's say, and it happened that appear so many platforms, even maybe for short life, but someone are pretty serious, I would like to say. They're trying to connect with us in terms of delivering the content from our side. It means now when we are thinking about the capturing during our exercises, let's say, in our sister faculty, so we are more careful what we are going to shoot and produce from our side because of the future use by these platforms, which is interesting. I mean, we never been thinking before because before it was mainly about the film itself, let's say, about the animation films, about the feature films and so on, what we are producing. But this part of live performing, it's interesting portfolio, let's say, at the moment, and we are very careful how we are handling it, you know, to do it really as best as possible, not just like the exercise, but real production to have a result ready for this use online, mainly online streamers, you know. So this is interesting from my point of view, and it happened just because of COVID, let's say, you know, I have to say, really. And in general, sure, so we can see that these stream platforms are growing, you know, they are hungry for content. It's question in general, what is good from my perspective for our students is that I think at the moment there is lots of work on the market in general. I think so they are pretty busy if they are interested in it, and they have to be very international because we are talking about international content productions. And it's question for the future if it has some limit or they need this food, let's say, in content in any kind of corner of the world to be done. And from this perspective, we are happy that the FAMU is still continuing to play some kind of core role in this training, you know, for the future professionals. This is what we are trying to keep, definitely develop better. And true is that if before COVID we have been thinking about streaming somehow in our curriculum in general, now it's as well it's a very important part how people are thinking who are trying to do some stuff over here under our roof, how it will look for these streamer platforms, you know, or streaming platforms, because it's a main part of our lives in general, of consumers of the content. And so it's changed as well our thinking about this stuff. Before it was a little bit on side of something. Now it's pretty core area of our talks, let's say. So this is my experience from these last 2 years as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I welcome Bernice. Hello. I hope that you heard at least the crucial part of the debate. We have got 5 minutes, so if you want to intervene, it's the moment.
It's my privilege and pleasure to have these 5 minutes. And thank you so much for Martha and Ondřej for your wonderful sharing, even though because I was engaged with something else, but I really inspired by both of your sharing, in particular for Ondřej just mentioned about, even though the pandemic seems to bring us a lot of sad stories, but for the theater practitioners or for the theater makers, it makes we become more like well organized. It's very important for our future, because for Hong Kong, actually, in terms of like documentation of our shows, and because we are always chasing for producing rather than to documenting, so this is a very I think it's give us a lot of insight and also lessons for us to learn from what we experienced for the past 2 years, how to document our production in a more strategic way, so as to use it for the future. And this is one of the reasons why we collaborate with ATI Prague for this particular talk series, is because this is part of our program for the online performances archive for Hong Kong for the past 2 years. So this is for me, one question I would like to address, or maybe Ondřej or Martha could respond, is because for Hong Kong in particular, the situation we do have a lot of online performances for the past 2 years, but because this is not, the shows were not presented like in traditional theaters, and it's a bit difficult for us to grasp the information. It's very like, it's not like I can collect some pamphlet or some programs in the theater. And in particular, for this particular archives that we are going to launch very soon, next month, we put a lot of efforts to ask our theater practitioners, or to like go Google and to ask our friends or practitioners to provide us information. And I think in particular for Hong Kong, what I would like to do is I would like to document what happened 2 years for the past 2 years, how the theater practitioners changed their mindset or their aesthetics or their thoughts about theater through an online platform. But I think it's a little bit hard for us to gather this information. And I would like to know whether the situation in Prague or in your practices are we encountering the same situation, and how I think it's very important for us as well is how all this experience could be gathered, so we could do better, or we could develop further based on all this research. But without that materials, it's hard for us to do any research. So this is one of my concerns. And also another issue I addressed in Hong Kong, in particular as a theater critics association, is how to equip our critics for a new type of discourse or aesthetics of viewing online performances. It's a little bit hard for some, I won't say traditional, but because theater they have a convention or something that we are familiar with. But with that online platform or that online perspective, it's not film somehow, it's a theatrical experience, but because we are also looking for some liveness. So for some critics, it's a learning process for the critics, even though for me as well, to find the discourse and also the aesthetics, the way to appreciate, and also to kind of how to make a discussion or a conversation with our theater practitioners through a research or through different kinds of like dialogues. This is 2 questions that I'm concerning, and I'm looking forward to your feedback if you have any thoughts or sharings to share with us.
I think that we are facing the same shift towards the relationship to theater criticism and theory as such. And I think it's somehow the development of the theater somehow met with the development of the COVID situation. So I wouldn't know if the COVID was the reason or it was the peak moment when it all met. And I think definitely Czech theater theory and criticism needs to, look back at this method, at their method and terminology and the way they work. And I think for me as a practitioner, the best way is to connect with the actual theater environment. Because before that, the theory was that the critic has to step aside and shouldn't contact with the theater practitioners at all, that we should become like two separate planets. And one is turning and the other one is circulating around it. And it can never create an environment comfortable for both planets. So I think we should consider ourselves one planet and one universe. I think this is a starting point where we should reappear ourselves as well. So I don't have a way out of it, but this is my vision for the future. And and I think somehow it gives a suggestion for the first question. Start to be in direct contact with the artists, because they have to understand that what the theater historians, theoreticians, and critics are doing for them, not for themselves. So if we flourish and nourish and cultivate the theory by being open with them, we all create the same ecosystem. I think if we understand each other as a part of one ecosystem, it might help us. These contradictory words, I think, did not bring any productive results. But I don't know if this is something what you asked.
Yes, thank you so much, Marta. It's very touching remarks for me as because we are in here. Even for critics or for us as us administrator, we are part of the ecology. So we are working together actually for the development or for the good of the whole system. So I think it's good for us to have more dialogue and conversations to know each other, and also because of the this crisis. And I think we need more solidarity and support to each other, and that's the most important thing. I think it's also a very encouraging remark for this is our last talk for this series. And I really also want to address for Jeffrey's questions about the festival and how to make works like for online to be able to reach more audience, because I have to say I really learned a lot from the ATI in Prague, because I think last year, or starting from the COVID, and I received some invitations from ATI about logging into for festival online about the Czech circuits for that particular year. And I really enjoy a lot of interesting shows online through the ATI's documentation, and they did a lot for international audience or for international festival managers to bring the shows after the pandemic. I think this is something really important and to learn from Prague and from ATI. And this is not a promotion for ATI, of course, but I really learned a lot from them, and in particular for this wonderful collaboration with Martina, and also their continuous support to Hong Kong and also IATC. And thank you so much for this wonderful connection. And Marta, Martina, do you have any things to say?
I would like to thank you to provoke us to get back to some topics we addressed to the professional community during COVID. As I mentioned in all the introductions, it's very valuable and inspiring for us to get back to some topics we discussed maybe 1 or 2 years ago and to see it from today's perspective, because we are really in a deep shift, not only in the sense of or in the ambience of the cultural sector, but in the whole society. And we need to understand it through our field of interest, which is theater or performing arts. So we learned also a lot during our talks. I think there were some moments where we saw already some small possibilities to how to collaborate further, how to exchange further, what projects would be transferable also to some collaborations between our country and Hong Kong or other Asian countries. And well, thank you very much for initiating this small series of talks. Thank you to our guests today.
Yes.
And well, let's keep in touch. And
yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for Andrei and also for Marta for your wonderful sharing. And of course, this is our talk series 1, and we're going to have a talk series 2 later in July. And there will be 7 local speakers to share about their experience in Hong Kong. So as I just mentioned, and also to echo some of our Andrei's remarks, for Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts, which is one of our very important theatre institute and academy in Hong Kong, and they are trying to initiate more students to produce or to create online performances in future. So I think for Academy for Hong Kong is also one of a very important aspects for the students, in particular for theater students, to know more about how to make theaters not only on stage but on virtual stage. So I'm really looking forward to see more shows online, and also as Martina just mentioned, to look forward have a more collaboration with ATI, and also please stay with us, like for IATC, the Facebook, and also the ATI's Facebook and also website. So I'm looking forward to see you all very soon in person in Prague or in Hong Kong. Okay, thank you so much, and good evening and good night. Bye bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.